We have an opportunity to not just offer solidarity in words, but to commit to political action, local action, and international action that will give us what justice requires, and that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea.
CNN fired you for speech they deemed anti-Semitic. Why?
Yeah, I don't know. They still haven't told me that. Mm-hmm. They never told me it was anti-Semitic, and it wasn't anti-Semitic. I laid out a criticism of the Israeli government.
After you came from Palestine?
After I came from Palestine. I got off the plane, went straight there.
A lot of people say this. Why should a black man in America care about what's going on in these other places when we're still fighting for a lot of civil liberties here?
Because it's not an either-or claim. I got that, too, in the last couple of weeks. Yo, why are you over in Palestine all the time?
It makes sense. I understand why people would say that.
Do something for black people.
If black people are so effed up here, well, why fight somebody else's fight?
Right, and I guess, one, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? Like, I can fight for black people here and struggle abroad. But again, there's a relationship between the two. The New York City police, they're killing us. But they're being trained by Israeli security forces. So Israeli police,
really?
Yes.
When I was at the Apartheid Museum a couple of weeks ago, Mandela said that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians.
Exactly. I come from a tradition of black people that believe that we have to be internationalists. You know, Malcolm went there. You know, he made 3 trips to the Middle East, specifically went to Palestine twice in his last 2 trips.
Anytime you beg another man to set you free, you will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourselves. And until the American Negro lets the white man know that we are really, really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom, our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
The Associated Press news service is facing growing criticism for firing a young reporter after she was targeted by a right-wing smear campaign for her pro-Palestinian activism while she was a college student at Stanford. The AP says it fired Wilder for violating its social media policy. The decision came just days after Israeli forces bombed the building housing the AP's office in Gaza.
What does this mean? Does this mean that any student who was an activist in college, which is what students do, they're activists in college, can't become a journalist? What happens if they're activists on abortion or climate change? Or is this specifically about Israeli-Palestinian conflict because of the pressures that these news organizations feel?
In the past year, the ice cream company Ben & Jerry's was accused of terrorism. Actress Emma Watson was called an anti-Semite. Actor Mark Ruffalo faced virulent attacks on social media, and a full-page ad in the New York Times portrayed musician Dua Lipa and models Bella and Gigi Hadid superimposed over an image of a Hamas rocket. What do they all have in common? Speaking out in support of Palestinian rights. But the backlash isn't limited to high-profile companies or even celebrities. In recent years, there have been hundreds of cases involving censorship and silencing of those in the West who advocate for Palestinians.
Fordham University, there's a group of students who've been advocating for justice in Palestine for years who cannot get their organization formally recognized by the university because the message has gone out that they are anti-Semitic, when there's no hint of that whatsoever. And there's many Jews who want to participate in this movement who are also banned from doing that work.
What's gone so wrong on America's college campuses that you have students openly applauding the terrorist killings of 1,200 or more civilians?
Harvard students who signed a letter blaming Israel for the violence may struggle to find jobs after college. More than 30 student groups joined a statement that said Israel was responsible for the unfolding violence that sparked international backlash. Now executives in finance and tech want the students blacklisted.
The billionaire hedge fund boss asking Harvard to name members of the groups that signed, so none of us inadvertently hire them. Last night, their names and faces emblazoned on a truck in Harvard Square.
I'm all for free speech. I'm all for free speech. Free speech does not mean there's no consequences for free speech.
Look, you have a right to express your views, but when you express your views, there are consequences.
Scream actress Melissa Barrera was fired from the franchise's upcoming 7th film after she made a series of social media posts calling Gaza a concentration camp and Israel's war genocide and ethnic cleansing.
Why are they trying to cancel Roger Waters. All over, all the press in the Western world. Everything. Roger Waters, anti-Semite, glorifying Nazism, wearing a thing. Why aren't there real journalists going, hang on a minute, this is bullshit. Maybe I'll call up and see what he has to say. Why aren't you? Piers Morgan, eh? Ignore all the newspapers, because that's all fake news. They are not printing the story in any way that is even-handed. If we shout the lie loud enough, Roger Waters is an anti-Semite, we'll be all right. We'll get people to believe it. We can vilify him, we can probably destroy him, and we will get him in the end. Well, no, you won't. Because it is a lie. You can gather as many morons together as you want to repeat your lie, but it remains a vicious lie. They even got the President of the United States, dotard that he is, to claim that he had seen photographs
of the beheaded babies.
Of the beheaded babies.
Yeah.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children.
And then admitted that he actually didn't. Yeah. Do you think what Hamas did on October 7th can be justified?
Well, we don't know what they did do, but was it justified for them to resist the occupation? Yeah.
You cannot expect people who have been oppressed for 75 years to sit down in their rooms, write poetry, write books, novels, and not fight back.
I believe that the U.S. and the media has been very much on Israel's side without realizing that Palestinians have been going through suffering for 75 plus years at the hands of Israelis.
Just the other day, I saw you at the State Department asking questions of Blinken's spokesperson. What's it like in that room?
It's surreal to go in that room and to see this and witness the subdued tone about what is the greatest atrocity of our time being carried out before our eyes. In my opinion, a genocide, in the opinion of many genocide scholars. And there's me and a few other reporters, less than I can count on this hand, who are actually willing to ask tough questions. The U.S. started a war, the first Gulf War, over bogus claims of incubator babies being taken off their incubators in Kuwait by Saddam Hussein's troops. Now it's really happening in the Gaza Strip right before our eyes. You can go on Twitter and see it right now. And the U.S. is sending more weapons.
I think the war on Palestine and the movement for liberation in this period since October the 7th has allowed for the mask to slip off across the West, and those claiming to have sort of a very liberal approach to free speech have proved their illiberal nature or their reaction to what's going on.
The exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, joins me now from Washington, D.C. Great to see you, Crown Prince. I really appreciate you joining the program. We're a month in now to the Israel-Hamas war. What is your reaction to what has been going on?
Piers, I think that the world cannot ignore the elephant in the room, and that is since the rise of radical Islam as a result of the Iranian Revolution that took my country hostage to begin with and has since fomented this kind of antagonism, regional instability, warmongering, supporting terrorist groups and what have you. We should not really be surprised that at the tail end we are faced with this kind of rises in tension. And I think it's telling that, you know, we have to cure the disease ultimately.
I interviewed the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog. I know you met him as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu on your historic visit to Israel. And he said this about Iran.
There's an empire of evil from Tehran emanating with a whole culture of hate to eradicate all of us.
The real culprit here is Iran. Without aid from Iran, there would be no Hamas capability to attack Israel. I think it is long past time for the United States to put Iran on notice that you have killed and destroyed enough that you're going to pay a price.
How can you be a citizen of the United States, the country that has generated more violence and militarism in the world over the last 5 or 6 decades, and say, look at those people over there, they are incredibly violent? We play a significant role in what has been happening in the Middle East because we've been interfering and dominating that region in order to have access to the oil.
I wasn't talking about violence.
So,
I was talking about theocracy. That doesn't happen here.
No, well, okay, that doesn't happen here, but at the same time, Iran isn't invading lots of other countries and occupying them for a decade, nor are fundamentalist Muslim countries the way the United States is. So these things are interlinked because we are continuously interfering in that part of the world. And so to say...
Really, it's all our fault?
It's not all our fault, but when you send your military for 6 straight decades into other countries to bomb them, kill their children and women and innocent men, prop up dictators, yeah, you take responsibility for your actions.
You said that if the Nuremberg principles were applied, every post-World War II president would be indictable.
It's probably true.
What did Eisenhower do that you would indict him for?
Eisenhower overthrew the conservative nationalist government of Iran with a military coup. In Iran, it led to 25 years of brutal dictatorship, finally overthrown in '79.
Maybe completely disappeared out of the American consciousness, but in the Iranian consciousness, 53 was the basic event in Iranian history until '79. So there's a sort of gap there.
In 37 years, His Imperial Majesty has learned how to wear a brave face. This week, he needs it more than ever.
The British and the Americans, they gave him an ultimatum that we're going to go with the coup. If you're not with us, there's no guarantee you'll be on the throne afterwards. They even hint that his younger son would be replaced by him. So he has no real choice but to enter this situation. So he participates in, you can say, the original sin of the coup. And from then on, he knows that the monarchy is really delegitimized.
With tanks and machine guns in the streets, the government had warned that any demonstrations to mark the religious festival of Ashura would be halted and dispersed. But as the festival approached and a bloodbath seemed likely, the Shah changed his mind. On his orders, the troops and tanks withdrew to a new line, protecting the rich northern suburbs and his palace.
The worst shooting incident that took place was in Jala Square in September
of '78.
Curiously enough, President Carter was at Camp David with Begin and Sadat as the Jala Square incident took place in Tehran. It was a real conflict of interest that was extraordinary. The Shah was presented with a plan by his own Savak people and by the head of the military. People who've looked at it in retrospect say, well, but it would have been a bloodbath. Well, no, it didn't have to be a bloodbath at all. The plan didn't call for going out and shooting everybody. It called for 2 things. One, rounding up all of the leaders of the opposition, who they knew who they were, and maybe taking them off to a remote island someplace for a little while. And secondly, to sort of flood the streets with police and military people, so that any rioters who felt the need to do that would be intimidated and would go home. You didn't have to kill a lot of people to do that.
Why the Shah did not try this, and he was being urged also, I mean, Zbigniew Brzezinski was calling for another military coup, essentially, right, and trying to persuade the generals to buck up the Shah.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when the first big riot occurred in Tabriz, in fact, there were defections in the army. They had to send new troops in there to be able to restore order. And through the 16 months of rioting, you find rarely that soldiers are asked to shoot. It is always officers that shoot. So it's to ask a soldier to actually shoot. Sullivan here says if you do that, they're going to be shooting at their own relatives. So what will they do? They're likely to turn their guns on their officers. You're going to have a civil war rather than a quiet takeover. And I disagree with Gary about, well, it would have been easy to do. You round up the leaders. First of all, there were no leaders. There was Khomeini pronouncements in Paris, unless you actually assassinate him. In Iran, there were people who were leaders because they represented Khomeini.
Ayatollah Khomeini, a man the Western governments may shortly have to learn to deal with. The prospect of an oil state in the hands of a 79-year-old priest may be disturbing.
There were ideas about assassinating Khomeini and so on. I mean, these I assume were quickly put to rest. As I recall, he returned to Tehran on a giant Air France plane that had about 100 or more journalists on it. So.
I was out in the streets that day, and it was a very peaceful thing. Everybody was buoyed up and happy. I mean, for whatever reason. I mean, there's nobody glowering in the corners or anything. And everybody was happy, and, my Iranian friends were saying, hey, look what's happening.
Yeah. Did you appreciate Khomeini and the power of the Islamist forces that were bubbling up?
I appreciated the fact and the power that Khomeini had. And when the plane came, I hoped the plane wouldn't ever land in Tehran, let me put it that way. Because I knew, and it was quite powerful, and people deferred to him.
Israeli revolution or grassroots revolution, it's kids in the street, high school students, high school graduates, college students, they called them Bacheha, lads. These were the people who got together. Every day they would go around causing a problem. What you're going to do, round up everyone?
Led by the mullahs, the Muslim priests, the crowds assembled and then choked the center of the city. There were columns of women wearing the traditional chador or veil, and among them the widows and children of men who had died in earlier demonstrations.
Until I was maybe 15 or 16, I used to pray. After that, when I went to high school, I stopped praying and I forgot about religion in a way. I don't know, I blame myself. I blame myself because I didn't realize that my cook was a Muslim and he prayed 3 times a day. And I would go in the kitchen to tell him what to cook in my bikini. And he would turn his back to me and make believe that he was doing something. I didn't realize that he didn't want to look at me. I didn't realize. We didn't realize that the country was Muslim.
Today it is as if every priest in every church in England was standing in his pulpit every Sunday to denounce the Prime Minister and the Queen.
If you were going to bet, here's a guy who's got 37 years on the throne, a tremendous amount of experience, money, people, Secret Service, all of those advantages. On the other side, you've got a bunch of people with basically no guns operating out of the mosque. Who would you bet on? Iran has always been the grand exception to almost every rule that you want to give as far as foreign policy is concerned. The CIA came to a conclusion in 1978 that he was good for another decade. He was gone in 6 months.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
We're not as dumb as we looked, however. Because before I left, we went through the Air Force planes and took out all our sophisticated equipment and brought it home.
Today, I was both delighted and at the same time ashamed by the support the people were giving the press, because this very press, until 2-3 months ago, called their sons saboteurs, terrorists, and foreign-led enemies of the realm. But because we went on strike in cooperation with them or in sympathy with them, they have forgiven us. They have actually forgiven our treason. If they shot me today on the street, I wouldn't be surprised. I can't forget the big headlines we used to run about 2 saboteurs being shot dead in this alley, or some foreign-led terrorists being put on trial and all that.
Is the mistake to think that because the Shah's regime fell so spectacularly, the same thing can happen now, so that if we put pressure on the Islamic Republic, it's going to disintegrate. And here I take an issue with Gary, that in 2009, the regime was able to crush the opposition. The Shah could have done the same. Here's the difference. The Shah didn't have the legitimacy and couldn't do it. In 2009 and now, whatever one thinks about the Islamic Republic, it does have legitimacy. It does have the pastors, it does have the passage, and they're willing to use massive force. So it's not sort of a house of cards that is going to come down with someone huffing and puffing in Washington. It might even be able to react in various ways that would be costly to the United States.
To Iran this evening, deadly protests sweeping across that country after the death of a young Iranian woman while in the custody of the morality police.
She died days later in the hospital. Her family say she had been beaten. Police have denied this.
But her family disputes that claim, as do the thousands of Iranian women taking to the streets. Videos filmed by demonstrators show women burning their headscarves or hijabs.
With women and girls at the helm demanding dignity, respect, and change.
Mehsا Amini.
Mehsا Amini.
Mehsا Amini.
Mehsا Amini.
Mehsا Amini.
Her story sparked protest against the Islamic Republic.
Iranians have marched in the streets to denounce the Islamic regime that's ruled for more than 40 years.
This is just layers of anger, the outpouring of anger that has been building up over the years.
We will continue to counter the Iran regime's human rights abuses. We'll continue to counter their destabilizing actions abroad, its support for terrorism.
We want the Islamic Republic to be gone.
Don't worry, we're going to free Iran. They're going to free themselves pretty soon.
Clearly, these protests are not dying down, and they are all over the place as we see.
The protests died down actually after the first 3-4 days, and they tilted away from protest towards riot. When the riots began, the protests decreased, and as time went by, the riots became much more violent. That's why the numbers came down very quickly.
Okay, so look, we have, as I said, many pictures. We've just had our report from our correspondent, and the narratives are clearly very, very different. Do you think that your government, the Islamic Republic, is in any danger right now and needs to rethink how it deals with people? After 43 years, people are showing their frustrations.
Iran always changes and shifts. That's why we have different governments. But you also have to keep in mind that less than 3 years ago, when General Soleimani was murdered by the Americans, we saw the millions of people come to the streets in Tehran and millions in other cities as well. The legitimacy of the Islamic Republic of Iran in the eyes of Iranians is clear and evident.
I know that you are speaking on behalf of the government.
I'm not speaking on behalf of the government. I say my opinion. Yes, I do sympathize with the Iranians because the narrative against Iran in the West is completely one-sided. All of the Iranian media is sanctioned. Many individuals have lost their accounts. I have lost my Facebook and Instagram accounts. This is a rare occasion where I'm able to say something that's different, and I'll be attacked for it.
The woman who was murdered in Iran that started off with not wearing a hijab and then was beaten up, and I don't know ultimately why, how she was killed, that has stirred up all these Iranian women. That kind of violence to me is inexcusable.
Do we all agree, right, since Sister Bonnie seems to agree, that a woman has a right to wear what she wants? Do you agree with that, right? Yeah. I'm not saying I believe in it or I don't believe in it. You agree with that, right? Now, okay, fine. Now you as a human, right, and we as humans, then we should be consistent in supporting women's right to wear what she wants. Our sister brought a really good example in India. They're banning the wearing of hijab for the Muslim ladies. They want to, but they're banning it. So you and many other people, we should be having rallies and speaking up, saying that, you know what, how come you're banning the Muslim ladies from wearing the hijab in India? They want to wear what they want to wear. How about this example, Sister Bani? In France, they banned the wearing of hijab in public. Now we should be equally standing with the Muslim ladies saying that they want to wear the hijab. How come you, French government, how come you ban it? Correct? You agree with that?
Well, that is wrong. Yeah.
Yes, if we want to stand with the women in Iran, we have to be consistently standing with the women, Muslim women in India and the Muslim women in France.
I agree.
Okay, how about this part over here? Do you agree, Sister Bani, right, since you brought this topic, that there should be laws in every country about decency and modesty?
You know what? I'm not for strict laws, because then strict laws perpetuates some negative things that I may not be in agree with. I believe in suggestions, really, modesty suggestions, and also whether it is causing harm to those around you. How is it affecting those around you?
So, sure.
Say someone gets on an airplane and they're, you know, a female and her bosoms are hanging out, and there's other people, there's children. Yeah, there should be something done about
Very good.
extreme immodesty, but to me it's about how it affects your fellow man.
Exactly, right? So
it's all about
These
that.
women walking down the street in these like dresses that don't cover their rear ends in clear heels, and I'm like, it's 2:42 p.m. That outfit is only appropriate at 2:42 a.m. in a gentleman's establishment. You are scarring children for life. I think it's weird. Discuss.
Make a point. You know, there are public indecencies.
Exactly.
You can't run around naked.
Exactly. So you and we agree that every country should have laws of modesty and decency, right? Okay, fine. So let's start from there. So that means in our country, there is morality police. A person, suppose if he or she goes out naked, the police will stop the person, arrest the person, fine the person, and imprison the person. Exactly the same way Iran would be doing. Because if we don't have laws of morality, then our children would be compromised.
You have to have laws of morality.
Exactly.
But it shouldn't it shouldn't lead into the death of an individual.
Exactly. Okay. We all agree with that, right? If they are supporting the women's right not to wear the hijab there, how come our media is not equally aggressively covering 100% wall to wall for the women in India and women in Europe?
I think there has to be incidents that are so outrageous that we you know, like violence,
They are.
death, and that kind of thing.
Yes. So in this country, Sister Bani, there have been women who have been shot plain blank, Muslim women. Hijabs have been taken out, right? 35 mosques have been burned down in this country. Where is the media coverage?
Well,
so
that's wrong.
Yes.
They're only covering what people want to hear.
Exactly, right? So
you really need to go to a different media source.
Exactly, Sister Bani.
The covering of the head is well, that's part of my problem. I don't understand the covering as being a tenet of modesty so much. You know, other parts, yes, but the covering of the head, I don't understand that part of it, and maybe you could explain it to me.
You know, in some African countries, people don't even the women, they don't even cover the chest. So when they look at you, Sister Bani, they may be saying, you know what, how come she's covering so much? Come on, modesty should be just covering down here. So what we say is modesty should not be left to subjectivity. God is the one who will decide what is modest, what is not, because, you know, He knows what is good for society, what is going to dilute, you know, the wonderful morality and decency. So if He gave certain commandments, which are also there in the other scriptures, He also gave in the Quran. That means we say, yes, we abide by it, because ultimately it will bring goodness in the society.
لیبرال دموکراسی بر پایه نفی دین بنا شده بود. جمهوری اسلامی بر پایه دین بنا شده. اونا ادعای مردمی بودن کردند. جمهوری اسلامی به معنای واقعی کلمه یک نظام مردمی است. 300 سال آمریکایی ها و اول اروپایی ها بعدم آمریکایی ها با منطق لیبرال دموکراسی حرکت کردن. حالا اگر یک حکومتی، یک نظامی در دنیا به وجود بیاد که منطق لیبرال دموکراسی رو رد کنه و با یک منطق واقعی به مردم هویت بده، به مردم کشورش هویت بده، اونها رو زنده کنه، اونها رو بیدار کنه، اونها رو قوی کنه و در مقابل لیبرال دموکراسی بیسته، این منطق لیبرال دموکراسی رو ابطال میکنه. این جمهوری اسلامیه.
Alhamdulillah, we can say, thank God, been trying for many years, and Press TV has been a loyal news outlet that was from the few that was not intimidated by Zionism and that really spoke about that Jewish people are outspoken against Zionism, and the Ayatollah Khomeini differentiated between Judaism and Zionism. So we really have to laud Press TV and Iran in general